Hi, this is Nate, and today we're going to be reading Chapter 39, Passing the Torch. It had been cold all week in Washington, D.C., and Thursday night, January 19th, 1961, snow fell thick and heavy. Washington, Southern, in its graciousness and geography, handles snow poorly. Everywhere cars stalled and people shivered. That evening, the Army and Navy were called. 3,000 servicemen, using 700 snow plows and trucks, worked through the night. The next day, the wind was mean and the temperature stayed below freezing, but the streets were clear. Wooden bleachers were set up outdoors in front of the Capitol. At noon, when some 20,000 invited guests filled those bleachers, the winter sun, reflecting off the banks of new snow, seemed unusually bright. It was Inauguration Day. Most of the presidential party wore scarves and mittens with their top hats and formal clothes. But the president-elect seemed to generate his own warmth, a quality he had in abundance. He took off his overcoat before he spoke. Then John Fitzgerald Kennedy put his hand on his grandfather's Bible and swore to uphold his mighty responsibilities. At 43, he was the youngest president since Theodore Roosevelt and the youngest man ever elected president. Next to him stood 70-year-old Dwight D. Eisenhower, at the time the oldest man ever to be president. The contrast between the two was as strong as the winter sun. Genial, likable Ike was the son of a poor Midwestern creamery worker, but his easy manner was an outside face. Inside was a core of steel. Eisenhower had worked his way through an Army career to the nation's top job. Harvard-educated JFK, the patrician son of a wealthy businessman, had been given every advantage our society has to give, but the silver spoons that fed him had not made him lazy. Quite the opposite. He and the other members of the large Kennedy family were trained to serve their country, to achieve, and to do their best. Over here we have a picture, and it says, "The new president delivers his inaugural speech, hatless and coatless." The wind blew as Robert Frost, America's favorite poet, read part of a poem he had written for this occasion. He spoke of a golden age of poetry and power, of which the noonday's the beginning hour. A golden age of poetry and power. Would this handsome young president bring it about? There were many who believed he could. Not since the first days of Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal had so many eager people clamored to join the political process. To clamor means to agitate noisily for something. The new cabinet, the president's top advisors, was going to be bipartisan. That meant it would include people from both political parties. Some of Kennedy's college professors were leaving their classrooms to become government officials. Thousands of Americans wanted to be part of the excitement that seemed to be building. It was amazing, the number of people who hoped to work to help their nation. John Kennedy had already suggested a Peace Corps, a volunteer agency that would let Americans unselfishly share their experience and knowledge with less fortunate nations. Before we move on to the next page, there's a picture down here. President Kennedy urged the creation of the Peace Corps. This Peace Corps volunteered in a poor district of Ankara, Turkey, helped residents form a library, nursery schools, community center, and clinic. By 1963, about 5,000 volunteers were serving 2-year stints in more than 40 developing countries. So, moving on to the next page. The young president, with his intense blue eyes, his thick head of hair, and his engaging smile, stepped up to lectern and began to speak. "We observe today not a victory of party, but a celebration of freedom," he said in strong, self-confident New England tones. "Let the word go forth from this time and place, to friend and foe alike, that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans, born in this century, tempered by war, disciplined by a hard and bitter peace, proud of our ancient heritage, and unwilling to witness or permit the slow undoing of those human rights to which this nation has always been committed. Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe to assure the survival and the success of liberty. Let us begin anew, remembering on both sides that civility is not a sign of weakness. Then he challenged his listeners. If a free society can't help the many who are poor, it can't save the few who are rich. And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. So up here we have a picture that goes with that. President Kennedy's charm, youthful appearance, and quick wit appealed to many people. On that bright January afternoon, hope vibrated in the air. Our new president had big dreams that everyone could share. He intended that the nation reach for greatness within itself. He was surrounding himself with men and women who would be called the best and the brightest. He expected to get things done. Everyone talked of his charisma. Charisma is an exceptional ability for leadership and for securing the devotion of large numbers of people. And so, when he noticed in the inaugural parade that there were no black cadets among the Coast Guard marchers, his first act as president was to call an aide and ask him to do something about that. The next September, there was a black professor and several black cadets at the Coast Guard Academy. This man, John F. Kennedy, was determined to be an active president, a good president, a president who would inspire the nation. Rachel Carson, ecologist. Rachel Carson wrote of science and the natural world, and she did it so well that all who read her books gained a new awareness of their environment, although, at first, no one paid much attention to what she wrote. In July 1951, she published The Sea Around Us, a book about reefs and islands and sea creatures and coral and sea plants. To her surprise, the book became a huge bestseller. Eventually, it was translated into 32 languages. The book was enormously influential. It introduced the ideas of ecology and conservation to large numbers of people. Ecology, which comes from the Greek word meaning habitation, is a scientific study of the interactions between living things and their environment. The Sea Around Us made Rachel Carson famous. The last book she wrote, Silent Spring, brought her enemies. It took courage to write that book. It was a look at the grim subject, pesticides, and how they were poisoning the earth and its inhabitants. In Silent Spring, Carson attacked the chemical and food processing industries and the Department of Agriculture. Those powerful interest groups lost no time in fighting back. Rachel Carson was mocked and ridiculed, but the fury and fervor of the attacks only brought her more readers. President Kennedy asked for a special report on pesticides from his Science Advisory Committee. The report confirmed what Carson had written, and it made important recommendations for circulating and controlling the use of pesticides. The public, which had been generally unaware of the dangers of the poisons sprayed on plants, was now aware. Modestly, Rachel Carson said that one book couldn't change things. But on that, she may have been wrong. So over here we have a picture. By the end of the 60s, at least 5 state legislators, alarmed by Rachel Carson's warnings about a poisoned world, had banned or limited the use of the pesticides called DDT. So that was chapter 39. I hope you all have a great day.